I'd like to welcome in Congressman Byron Donalds, a member of the House Oversight and Budget Committees, joining us now. Congressman, great to have you with us.
It's good to be back with you. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Now, of course, the left is trying to use this shooting to smear conservatives, and maybe they think they've found an angle here with this great replacement conspiracy theory. Here's President Biden referring to that earlier today. Here's what he said. Every time MAGA Republicans or pundits wrongfully vilify immigrants, or this is actually Chuck Schumer who said this, not President Biden. Every time MAGA Republicans or pundits wrongfully vilify immigrants or call them invaders, every time they falsely claim that millions of undocumented people cast ballots in our elections, every time loud, bigoted voices, these hard-right MAGA Republicans argue that people of color and minority communities are somehow posing a threat to the American way of life. We heard similar, obviously a little bit more muted, but that same kind of vein from President Biden today. I want to get your reaction to this kind of talking point we're hearing from Democrats.
Well, first of all, I think what the Democrat talking points, they got them from the Morning Joe and they got them from CNN, because I've been in the conservative movement for 10 years. I've never heard of great replacement theory until they started talking about it on MSNBC and on CNN. If you've actually taken the time to go through the manifesto from the shooter, does he mention that? Yes, but he also calls himself a fascist. He also says that he subscribes to communism. These are not conservative ideals. He does not prescribe himself to be a conservative. And so it's important for people to understand that what Joe Biden and the Democrats are doing is they're trying to use this issue, which is a tragedy for our nation, definitely a tragedy for the family members, the black family members, and the white family that lost loved ones in this shooting in Buffalo on Saturday. But to use this great replacement theory as some new talking point to show why they should be in charge of Washington, D.C. is atrocious. I think it's demagogic. I think it's disgusting. And this is not where leadership should be going. They should actually examine the shooter's motives, actually read the manifesto, and then talk about what are the issues that actually brought this tragedy to the people of Buffalo, New York.
We agree 100%. And of course, there's no time for that in today's political discourse. I want to talk about one of your colleagues, Eric Swalwell, and his reaction to this shooting. Is there anything worse, though, than politicians using their small kids as props in the way that Swalwell did here? Quote, "My 4-year-old son just FaceTimed me to ask what I'm doing to help the people in Buffalo, and why did the bad man do this? Absolutely gutting. This cannot be normal. It's time to ban assault weapons." And then there's also this gem from Swalwell this past weekend. "Sorry, House GOP, that the parishioners hogtied your boy. Sorry, not sorry." And he was referring to that shooting in California, which President Biden did not mention today. It's also a hate crime. And the fact check there is that shooting suspect was a Chinese man who targeted that church specifically because it was filled with Taiwanese Americans. Why did President Biden mention that today when he was talking about Charlottesville and Charleston and January 6th?
Oh, that's easy. Joe Biden doesn't want to talk about what happened to the church in California because he doesn't want to inflame the Chinese government. That's why he doesn't want to talk about it. It's much easier to separate Americans. It's much easier to try to say that when a tragedy comes to our country where black men and black women are killed, that somehow it's Republicans' fault. It's easy to go out there and say that because we don't operate the way that conservatives don't operate the way the Chinese Communist Party operates. So Joe Biden will not have the courage to actually talk about what happened in California. He didn't have the courage to go to Waukesha when, yes, there was a black man that ran over young white kids at a Christmas parade. He didn't have the courage to say anything then, but because politics suits it on his side of the aisle, here he comes going to Buffalo. The man is not a leader. Can we all acknowledge that finally? Yeah. He said he wanted to unify the country when he was inaugurated. He's done nothing to actually do that since he's been president of the United States.
Now, we say this all the time. This is a quote from Andrew Breitbart, that politics is downstream from culture. We mentioned that horrible take that Rolling Stone had and called the shooter basically a member of the mainstream Republican Party. But this might actually be a worse take coming from Deadspin, the sports site. An author wrote an article called "White Fans Were Entertained by Black Athletes a Day After a Racist Killed Black People in Buffalo. This is what white supremacy looks like." The writer starts out with this quote: "Sports only serve as an escape from society if you're white." He also cites a debunked story from this week about a man who apparently showed up at a church where the governor was worshiping. That story was completely debunked, but he used it anyway, and he went from that to Charlottesville. He mentioned Dylan Roof and January 6th, just like the president did today. And then he also wrote, never forget that Kyle Rittenhouse is a free man. What?
Listen, I used to read Deadspin a long time ago. I've not read Deadspin in years because you have lunatic reporters who write stuff like this. I would love this reporter to sit down and talk to me for 15 minutes. He'll never call me. He doesn't want to interview me because I don't fit his narrative,
right,
because he won't get the narrative that he's looking for. These tragedies, when they happen to our country, they're a shock to us all. I was stunned when I learned about what happened in Buffalo. But the last thing I'm going to do is go accuse my political rivals without actually sitting down and looking at the motives of the shooter, the person who actually perpetrated the crime. I'm going to say it again. If you go back and look at the manifesto, he is obviously an anti-Semite. He's blaming the Jews for this. He's not somebody who's operating in modern politics between Republicans and Democrats. He's not in Pennsylvania right now trying to advocate for who should be the next governor or the next U.S. senator. He wasn't doing any of that. You have a young person who obviously was radicalized in some parts of the internet, which is a terrible thing, and he committed an atrocity. Mm-hmm. Does that also mean that he's a mainstreamer in the Democrat Party or the Republican Party? Absolutely not. Anybody that uses rhetoric like that is somebody who should not be a journalist. But you know what? I'm not on the left. I don't cancel people. I would rather this reporter on Deadspin continue to spew his idiocy, so people can actually see the idiocy that does come from the radical left.
Yeah, nobody's holding a gun to these NBA players' heads and making them show up and play. They're getting paid a lot of money to do that. And I don't know. Great to get your insight on all this stuff, Congressman Byron Donalds. Really appreciate you. Thanks so much.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
All right.